Well, welcome everybody to first in our spring seminar series. We alternate these fall and spring, and we like to bring back some of the brightest and best and most authoritative voices in the area of sexual addiction recovery for men. And there's no better person to kick this off for us than our good friend Eddie Capparucci, who's joining us from Atlanta. Those of you who have watched these videos before and participated in them know that Eddie is a good friend of our ministry. He's a Christian counselor and coach, certified in treating problematic sexual behaviors. He's the creator of the inner child model for treating problematic sexual behaviors, unique approach that focuses on identifying unresolved childhood pain points and teaching individuals how to process emotional distress in healthy ways. His treatment method has been endorsed by many leaders in the field. He's the author of several books, including Going Deeper, How the Inner Child Impacts Your Sexual Addiction, Why Men Struggle to Love, Overcoming Relational Blind Spots. That's what we're going to be addressing today. And Removing Your Shame Label, Breaking from Shame and Feeling God's Love. He's also the administrator of two blog sites, menagainstporn.com and sexuallypuremen.com. And he's also the host of the monthly webinar, Getting to the Other Side. So Eddie, welcome back. It's great to see you.
Jay, it is always a pleasure to be here. And as you read that, I now understand why I feel so tired and how busy I am. So, but yeah, it's always fun to be with you. And I do appreciate you, those kind words you said at the beginning.
Yeah.
I do really appreciate that. Thank you.
Well, they're heartfelt, and we really appreciate our partnership. So we're going to be discussing Eddie's book, which is available on Amazon, Why Men Struggle to Love, Overcoming Relational Blind Spots, and then the underlying Reparenting the Inner Child. And I want to begin with a little bit of a personal story, and it kind of relates to the little joke about the wife who asks her husband, honey, how are you feeling? And he says, I'm a guy, I have no idea. I was brought up with a man who had no idea. And there was a reason for it. It wasn't that he was just a guy. My father was a wonderful man, a gentle, loving Christian man, a good provider, constant with the family. But he went through some very negative experiences when he was in middle school. He was beaten up. He had his bicycle stolen. He was called names. And that scarred him for life. And as a result of that, he had no adult male friends. All his friends were couple friends, usually chosen by my mother. And I asked him when he was about 80 about emotional issues. And he said, I don't know why anyone would ever want to look inside themselves. And what he didn't say is because there is so much pain. And we just had Dr. Jake Porter here, and he gave the statistics, the well-quoted statistics, that 80% of sex addicts have been abused in childhood, most of them sexually abused, but often other kinds of abuse. So we're not just talking about guys being guys here, are we, Eddie? We're talking about deeper issues.
You're absolutely right, Jay. It is. I agree with Jake. When I look at the men that I've worked with over the years, the hundreds of men, they have suffered some type of abuse, whether sexual, physical, enduring a lot of bullying, like you're talking about your dad. They are broken individuals. And what that does at some point, in order to be able to shut off that pain that they are facing, they shut off their emotions. And they just said, I won't feel. And with that, they continue to move through life. And, to your point, it's like, how are you feeling? It's like, I don't feel. How many men I've talked to over the years that have said to me, I'm not sure I understand what love really is. And even I, at one point, same thing. I felt not sure I quite understand and grasp what love truly means. Fortunately for me, that has changed over the years, but still, my ability to love compared to someone who was raised in a very healthy environment is not as fulfilling.
So let's kind of define some terms here as we begin. We're talking about emotionally undeveloped men. Can you give us a kind of definition of that or what that means and how it impacts?
Yeah, absolutely. An emotionally undeveloped male is someone who struggles to emotionally bond. And in our case, when we're dealing with the population that we work with, these men, what they do is they confuse emotional intimacy for physical intimacy. So therefore, for them, it is a sense that I will show you how much I love you by how I make you feel physically. And I never feel more love than when you are physical with me. So they have their wires crossed because that's not the foundation that God designed our relationship to be. They should be built on emotional connection, and then we take the physical intimacy and sprinkle it in to support the point. These men also suffer in a way that, one, they avoid emotional pain. They don't know they struggle to be curious about people. They're very inwardly focused. There are many things which I outline in the book. I actually call them blind spots. And there are 14 that I've identified that what they do is they inhibit a man's ability to emotionally connect.
So let's get into the blind spots. What are the blind spots and how do I identify them?
Yeah, what I said before, blind spots are those elements that we did not get fully developed in our lives growing up. So, as a child, we are supposed to be walked through the stages of emotional development by our parents or a guardian. Men who are emotionally undeveloped do not go through those stages. For example, the area of trust. Okay, what is trust? Trust is, as a child, I could turn away and then realize that, feel confident that if I look back, my parents are still there. I can trust them not to abandon me. They are supposed to teach us how to regulate emotion. Kids face so many emotions in their life growing up because things are always changing. Everything brand new to them. So therefore, they need to learn to regulate their emotion. They need to learn empathy, putting themselves in someone else's shoes. They need to be able to attune so that I can try to pick up what are my peers feeling. Oh, I can see Mary seems very quiet today. Let me go check on Mary. But the one that is, I think, the most critical one is our ability to sit with emotional distress. And if we're not taught how to do that, then I have a child. We're going to have to figure out, what do I do with this pain? Okay. Like, for example, let's say, the neighbor next door, took your Nerf gun and broke it. So you come home to your dad and you're upset and you say, Dad, he broke my gun. And instead of your dad being compassionate and helping you process through to say, well, you know what? Sometimes these things happen. And daddy's like, what did I tell you about lending out your toys to people? Do you know how much money that thing costs? You're just so damn irresponsible. And he just goes on and on and on. He goes, go to your room. Now the kid is sitting here. He has the emotional distress of, one, his toy's gone, but now he's getting blamed for it. He's been, told that he's not, he doesn't measure up. So now he's sitting with this pain, and you have to figure out, what do I do? So, not having a lot of worldly experiences and being more emotionally based in their thinking than cognitively, what do they come up with? These children come up with one solution, and that's a great solution. I won't think about it. I won't think about it. And how do they go about doing that? They learn to distract themselves. Too much television, too much video game, too much food, too much in their own head with fantasy. And then they take that same coping mechanism, which is a wonderful coping mechanism for a young child who haven't been given that skill set, and they use it in their teen and adult world. They don't sit with the pain, and instead they look for the distraction. So that's where the problem lies. And within it, then we come up with the blind spot, because again, I don't have that emotional development that I need. I don't have those skill sets.
Can you give us a definition of the word regulate that you used? It's used a lot, and it's used a lot in seminars and things that we've done with sex addicts and so on. What does it mean to regulate oneself?
What it really means, Jay, is to be able to, first and foremost, I identify that I am feeling something, okay? That usually most people will identify that they're feeling, sad, they're feeling angry, they're happy, or they're afraid. So if I'm afraid, if I'm sad, or I am angry, what I need to be able to do is regulate that mood. And that way I regulate it, especially the anger, is one, to slow everything down, to realize, you know what, there's something else going on here. Anger is not the primary emotion I'm feeling. What is it? So therefore they learn to drill down, and whether they learn through breathing techniques, through tapping, through rocking, you learn just to be able to slow down so that you can then figure out, okay, I'm angry because that event happened, but what's the emotion that's really tied into that event? So therefore, maybe I feel disrespected. Now, if I can go to somebody, I could talk about the fact I put a word to it.
Mm-hmm.
That's what our parents are supposed to teach us. When I'm emotionally deregulated or dysregulated, they're supposed to be able to come along and say, wait, whoa, this is the word. Use this word. So there I can go to someone, and instead of screaming, yelling, or withdrawing because I'm feeling, a sense of being disrespected, now I can say, you know what you did is very disappointing to me. It really hurt because I feel very disrespected. You're going to get a totally different outcome because of it. And that's why emotional regulation is so important.
So what you're really saying, and I want to put this in the context of the men we deal with, which are sex addicts, people who are addicted to porn and other things, is that there are certain events in life which are painful, and we have to pay attention to those. Because if we don't pay attention to them, then we'll be both in denial and distracted into something else. And that's where the acting out comes as a soothing mechanism.
Yes, you are spot on. And in fact, just had this conversation with one of my clients earlier this morning. He had relapsed looking at pornography, and he's sitting here and telling me, I'm not sure what it is. I seem to feel like my life is in order, all of that. But then if we drill down, what it was is the idea that he feels rather incompetent when it comes to his work. And he always thinks someone is scrutinizing and criticizing what is going on.
Yeah.
But he just pushes that aside and says, oh, no, probably not really that. Well, he does that as an adult. But going back to the inner child, the child doesn't do that. The child holds on to that. Mm-hmm. And with that, the child then starts to feel this level of discomfort. And before you know it, he's off and running. But your point is well taken. It is the idea we need to be very mindful. How am I doing every day, whether I'm being drained mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually? And also, what core emotional triggers that I have identified, which one of those have been activated? Because if you don't do that, you're just kicking the can down the road, and then things just pile up, and then before you know it, you're off and running.
Yeah. Our guest today, Eddie Capparucci, his book, Why Men Struggle to Love, Overcoming Relational Blind Spots. So Eddie, can you comment for us on the role that society plays in struggling emotionally certainly is not of value among a lot of male societies, whether they be athletics or politics or whatever group of men are gathered together. As a matter of fact, society views men gathering together as kind of dangerous.
They're absolutely right. You get into that toxic masculinity thing.
Right.
The idea that, things have definitely changed. Starting back in the 60s and moving forward, men have been encouraged to, understand their more soft side, their feminine side, what basically understand your emotion. However, that doesn't still happen very much when we look at the core family. For the most part, boys are being taught still, be tough, be hard, don't, cry, or somebody's gonna laugh at you. You can't share your emotions, or they're gonna sit there and call you a sissy. So they have to learn to tough it up. Girls, on the other hand, fortunately, it's been a lot different. There's not that leaning toward just for girls to be, oh, you have to be feminine, you have to just sit and not do anything wrong. They are taught to let's get into life. You can be a little rough and tumble, and you still can be feminine. And that's good. But for the boys in our society, there's still this undue pressure. Do not show emotion. You can't show your underbelly to anyone, or you will be considered weak.
So can you talk about some of the blind spots that you cover in the book, and maybe we can get into a few of these?
Yeah, absolutely. So the 14 are these. I'm going to go real fast. One is avoiding emotional pain, which we've talked about, which I said is one of the most difficult things that we have. The lack of curiosity. And when I talk about this, Jay, I'm not talking about lack of curiosity with figures or facts. Like, you may be very curious in banking. You may be curious about sports, but we're talking about curiosity in people. Drilling down, asking questions about that. Hypersensitive to rejection, criticism, or to being falsely accused. The struggle to connect. It's hard for them to bond with someone emotionally. They are inwardly focused. And what I mean by that is, again, growing up as a child, if you feel that there's nobody really there for you to help you resolve your issue, you have to turn inward, because I have to protect myself. So therefore, they become more inwardly focused people. They usually lack mindfulness. They also have what's called the low emotional IQ. They have something that calls HIDE, HIDE, and lie syndrome. Basically, what they'll do is they will kind of want to fade into the background. They don't want to be noticed. Or they learn that, you know what, it's better to lie, because I get in trouble whether I tell the truth or not. So I'm just going to lie, and perhaps maybe I won't face the consequences. Limited interest and passion. Many of them don't have a whole lot of those, and they also don't have a lot of friends either. Like you talked about, your dad didn't have those male friends. They struggle to connect with God, because again, not having that emotional bandwidth to connect with people, they find it almost impossible to connect with a spiritual being. They are very compulsive in their behaviors. They suffer from mood disorders such as anxiety and depression. Many have medical disorder of ADD. They lack contentment in life. Like, this is it, there's nothing else. And finally, the last one is they are fearful. And actually, Jay, fear lies within all of these blind spots. And it's across the board with all of them. So those are the 14.
Yeah. Let me just raise some questions about the first two, because I think they are very related. And you talk about the lack of curiosity. So the curiosity about relationships is that we ask questions of someone in order to value them and to make a deeper connection with them. But the risk, of course, with sex addicts is that as we do this, people just might discover who we are. We might make an inadvertent comment, or we might be telling a lie and it comes out in the conversation. And so the safety factor there, that we're behind the curtain. And of course, the addiction itself, and Jay Stringer talks about the shame comes before the addiction, shame leads us into the addiction, and then there's also the shame that coming out of it as well. So there's this desire to hide, which you also referenced, and then the sensitivity if someone questions us to say, oh, well, I didn't mean that, or you misunderstood me, or don't get me wrong, or all these kinds of comments that show that we're trying to control the intimacy. And that really makes a man unable, say in a marriage, to form deep intimacy, kind of the give and take of intimacy. And that can lead to a very lonely existence, can it?
Absolutely. And now, again, you notice what you touched upon in each and every one of those areas. Fear. I'm afraid. I'm going to say the wrong thing. I'm going to do the wrong thing. I'm going to get discovered. Okay. It goes on and on and on. And it is that fear that, again, if you go back to the first blind spot, avoid emotional pain. I don't want to sit with those fears.
Yeah.
I don't want to sit with them, and I don't want to come up with solutions that are healthy that would help me to alleviate some of those fears. Instead, it's much easier because, again, the coping mechanism created at a very young age is to just run away from it and to escape. But we have to understand that that is not, to your point, it is not really living. We're just existing. If you cannot be in that kind of conversation with someone who's supposed to be your soulmate, and to be able to ask questions, to be able to probe, to have a better understanding of who they are, then what you do is you are not living that abundant life. You're living a partial life. But that's what happens with those who are emotionally undeveloped. They are not living that life the way God designed it to be.
Yeah. Now we will get on to some of the solutions later on in our conversation, but I want to stick with the problem now and talk about this lack of passion. Kurt Thompson, in his books, The Soul of Shame, The Anatomy of the Soul, and now the one he has out now called The Soul of Desire, really convinced me that desire is part of God's unique endowment for humanity, that God has made us with desires. And it's the one thing the enemy is afraid of, because our desires that are captured by God are very powerful and very glorifying to God. You think of somebody like Michelangelo, painting the Sistine Chapel, or King the David, or the Pietà, or any other thing where someone fully gives themselves to a task that is really God glorifying. And the enemy hates that. And so part of the addiction thing is to derail us into some swamp where we're dissipating our energies for something that will never work. So a lot of people who are sex addicts, for instance, they're interested in lots of other things. They're interested in sports. They're often successful at business, etc. But they lack this passion. Where does that come from, and what kinds of things can be done to combat it and to get it on track?
Yeah, well, first and foremost, I think for a lot of people, especially for men with that, again, emotionally undeveloped, passion comes from people challenging us at a young age. Expand your horizon. Look outward. Try to take on things that seem difficult and that you are afraid of doing. You're afraid of trying, but go ahead and try it anyway. Take that chance. So therefore, instead of a world that is so broad for us, we have a world that is like this little box. And this is our world. And we have our stuff that's in it. And that's what we stay with, because what is this? This is comfort. And you can put porn in here, you can put the sex addiction, because that's comfort too. All right, but that's what I know. I know this. So what people need to do as they continue to start to become emotionally developed is to widen this window, to be able to look outward to see what are some of the passions that they can tap into that are available out there that resonate with them, that you say bring glory to God, but also makes them feel in a way that I also have more of a purpose in life. But if you're going to stay in this little window here, you're not going to accomplish that. So you have to start to broaden it. And part of the way you broaden it is by one, understanding you're in this little box. So then number two, as I come out of it, it's just a lot of it is research. A lot of it is talking to other people about what are their passions, what are their, things that they love to do. Sitting and journaling a little bit about what would I like? What would I go back when you were younger? Okay, because I really believe what happens with these gentlemen, with these people who get caught in addiction, if our true self got stifled, our true self got pushed aside. I mean, personally, to tell you the truth, I don't think I've ever told anybody this, Jay. You're the first guy I'm going to tell. If I had not gone through the issues I went through in my life, I think I would have been a comedian. Seriously, I think I would have been a really good comedian. I think I might have even been an actor of some kind because I had that kind of passion. Now I've lived some of that passion as I've gotten older. I actually have been in community theater and starring, being in a couple of plays. I did It's a Wonderful Life. I was Clarence.
Oh my gosh.
The Angel, yes, and in The Odd Couple with Murray the Cop. So I mean, I enjoy that. I love it. I think that would have been me if I hadn't been stifled. So therefore, see, we could, if we spend the time doing self-reflection, we can come back and we can find out what are some of our passions. And you know what? It's never too late to fulfill any of them. Rodney Dangerfield, okay, he was a comedian, but he didn't get involved in comedy till he was almost 50 years old. He was an old guy before he actually got out there and started doing his comedy work.
Well, as somebody that's married to an actor, my wife will often say to me, the tension comes when the two actors want something from each other. And that's where the tension comes in. And then that's where the intimacy comes in. Because you'll see that it's a romance or it's some kind of mystery or something has to be solved. And the two people get together and there's a lot of back and forth and they solve it. And that's what real intimacy is about. I had to learn that because in my family of origin, we didn't talk about stuff. We didn't talk about problems, negative emotions. Everything was supposed to be buttoned up and just fine all the time, but it wasn't, of course.
Right. And we become stagnant, right. And again, it's not the life that God designed for us.
Yeah. So I want to go on and talk about both addiction recovery and dealing with the blind spots, or we might say, we talk about the 4 pillars of recovery, which is going away to a short-term recovery and then coming back and getting a therapist and going to a 12-step group and then having a Christian mentor. Those are the 4 things we say people should consider doing. So there's always that interplay between, am I dealing with my blind spots or my addiction? Is this a simultaneous thing that we need to engage with, or which comes first, or how do they relate to each other?
A large majority of it is simultaneous. However, when a person comes into recovery for the addiction, that's where a large majority of the focus needs to be. Because that's what we're trying to do first and foremost, trying to learn how to manage those addictive behaviors and keep them under control. But as we're doing that, we're going to stumble across a lot of these different blind spots. Like, for example, hide and lie. That's a very typical one that we're going to find, because lying is part of, the addiction aspect of things. So therefore, now we're starting to tackle that one in itself. We're also going to learn about, again, that low emotional IQ, not identifying what do I truly feel but staying with those core emotions again of anger, sadness, happiness, fear. Instead, we're going to start to learn, what do I truly feel? We're going to be teaching how not to be so sensitive about things, especially rejection and the idea of being falsely accused. So as we're going through the process, we're touching upon the blind spot, but the main focus at the beginning needs to be about how do we start to establish sobriety? Because if we don't have sobriety there, that's the crisis at the moment. And so therefore we're doing that, but we got to dive into the blind spot pretty fast, pretty quickly.
Yeah. So I want to move into the solution here in several areas. And so first of all, I would like you to reflect on the hope. So a lot of guys have been mired in this stuff, and they look and they say to themselves, I'm never going to change. It's all the same. I'm like a gerbil in a cage, and I'm just going around, and the same things happen all the time. Where's the hope here for somebody to make and gain real change in their lives as they address this stuff?
Well, I think, that's a really good point of what you bring up. The people who just seem to be caught on this hamster wheel and they can't get off it. But the fact of the matter is they can, but they need to understand a very important point. The behaviors that they're stuck in right now, they're stuck in it because they've been doing it since they were young. Now, maybe they weren't looking at porn or being involved in sex, but it might have been too much TV, might have been too much food, could have been all of that. It's something that they developed that would help them to deal with this inability to sit with pain. The idea of being able to get through an addiction is pretty simple, what needs to be done. It's not easy. And the reason it's not easy is because we lack the mindfulness every day to be able to say, these are the steps I need to be taking every single day that I could be able to stay one step ahead of my addiction. And once they understand that and they see here are the steps that we're taking, and they start to learn to become mindful, anyone can break out of an addiction. That lack of hopelessness is just, again, that hopelessness is just a tool that Satan uses to keep you stuck. And you have to be able to start to change the mindset, reframe your way of thinking, to be able to say, you know what, no, you know what, I can get through all of this, but I have to lean on other men. I have to lean on God. And for myself, I have to be very, very focused on what the steps are I need to take to get there. See, being emotionally undeveloped, we're not very focused. We could be very focused on tasks, different tasks, but when it comes to the things like in life, we're not very focused, and we have to do that.
Our guest, Eddie Capparucci, Why Men Struggle to Love, Overcoming Relational Blind Spots, his book. It's available on Amazon.com and other booksellers. Eddie, I want to pursue this relationships with other men quality, because in the 12-step group that I'm part of, there's a passage that talks about, we thought that women were the answer. And we find out that's men who are the answer. It's learning to be in a community of men. And when we get into our 12-step groups, we begin to hear other people's stories, and we begin to realize that we're not alone, that other stories may not be identical to us, but they have echoes. And we begin to say, that's me. I've been through that. I've felt that. And then we begin to tell our own story and realize that the shame dissipates as we tell the story. So can you reflect on the whole role of the community of men in the whole healing and transformation process?
Yeah, It is so critical. We call it universality. To your point, I am not alone. I have people who are surrounding me who know what I'm going through, right? They've been there or they are there, but they know what I'm going through. And with that, that starts to create what? An emotional connection. That's what we're talking about here. You're starting at this stage to create this emotional bond because it's really kind of hard at this point in time after you've been discovered to say, honey, let's start bonding. That's not really happening right now. Okay. They are not ready to bond, and rightfully so, because of the pain they've suffered, not just from the infidelity, but also from the deceit and the lying. So we need a place that we can do this. This is like our breeding ground for here to learn how to become emotionally engaged, and it is with other men. That and plus, now look at it this way, Jay. I think it's a really important point. Is you know what? Again, men growing up thinking, oh, you know what? The last thing you want to do is be vulnerable. Vulnerable is like, ooh, that's a yuck word. When you start to see that, you know what, I'm being vulnerable with other guys who, if I was younger and had been vulnerable with, would be laughing at me or calling me names. But these guys are relating to me. These guys are connecting with me. These guys are being vulnerable with me also. And I'm telling people things I've never told anyone. Never shared any of this before. And what does it all feel? It feels safe. And it's like, you know, as a client told me a week ago or so, when he first got involved in the group, it was like the huge weight came off his shoulders. And he felt so free and so liberated because it's like, oh, here it is. These are my band of brothers that I can come to and talk to about what's bothering me. See, I think there's one thing we do, Jay, in the recovery world when we talk to people about, you know, hey, make sure you have your accountability group and make sure you reach out when you're struggling. Well, everybody takes that to be, well, I'm struggling with, I'm triggered. That's when I reach out. When I'm triggered, I should reach out to people. No, that's wrong. We reach out to people when we're struggling with life. You know what? My boss has been such a jerk for the last 3, 4 months. He's been throwing all this stuff on my plate. That you're calling somebody to talk about that.
Right.
You know, you talk about the fact that, oh, you know what? Yes, I was, going to be nominated to be an elder at the church. I didn't get that. I wasn't selected. You call somebody, you talk about that. My wife is really, struggling with, an illness, and I feel so weak. I feel like I can't help her. You call somebody, because if you're doing it then, guess what? You never get to the ledge where you're going to jump off by acting out. You're always at one step ahead of everything. And that's the other idea of that community of men, that they're there to help me when life comes by and hits me across the face like a 2x4. I have people I can go to just vent and let it go.
Yeah. My sponsor tells me, he says, tell me the little things before they become big things. So because a man and as an addict, I'm dismissive. I tend to dismiss things.
Yes.
Now my sponsor is making me aware that I need to talk about those things, those little irritant things that are creating a problem, and get them out in the open before they become bigger things. And that's really helped me. And also the other thing. Yeah, go ahead.
I had a client of mine. He said something to me very similar to that a couple of weeks ago. I was asking him how things go. Because things have been going pretty well. So they're just this minor thing, and I started laughing, and he was like, "What's the matter?" And I was like, "When it comes to recovery, there are no minor things. You have to look at it because it may be minor to you, the adult who's
Right.
rationalizing it, but your inner child, it's not minor. Okay, and you need to. So you're right. Your accountability partner is spot on.
Yeah.
Talk about, tell them the little stuff
Yeah.
before you do anything else. So I wish men would get that point. It is, don't minimize anything and be able to go out there and talk about how you're dealing with life. Not wait until crisis comes and you're ready to throw yourself off the building by acting out. Then at that point, sometimes it's too late.
Yeah. So I want to ask you one more question, then I'm going to give you the floor for a final statement. And it has to do with marriage. You know, when Jake Porter was here, he talked about this whole reconciliation process after discovery, where the guy said, and he used 2 glasses of water and a podium, and the guy puts his glass of water on the podium and says, I'm all in this marriage. And the woman says, I don't know, we'll see. She gets off. He stays on there and then finally says, well, maybe he's serious. She gets back on. And then he says, this hurts too much, I'm getting off. And then finally they get to the place where they're both all in. And you know, when we're dealing with our own stuff, addictive wise, we're dealing with our own blind spots and so on. There comes a point where the relationship has to take front and center as well, the us part of the recovery. And that can be scary for men because we feel like we're ill-equipped, that we're certainly have a checkered past, but we want to have that intimacy that is really what God had in mind when he brought man and woman together. And, you know, Paul says a man who loves his wife loves himself. We can tend to put the wife on the other side here, but the wife is part of us. We become one flesh. And so as we face some of these things and we begin to trust that intimacy can grow, what are the benefits that can accrue to a marriage as we begin to walk this out and to have the courage to deal with it?
Oh my God, Jay, we just started a new show. You know that? That's what this there are so many benefits that will occur. First and foremost, it is going to be the development and creation of an intimacy unlike anything ever experienced before, because it will be grounded for the first time on emotional intimacy and connection and not physical intimacy. I tell men, you know what? Emotional intimacy is stronger than physical intimacy. They look at me like I have 3 eyes, but yet when we get down to that finish line, they're all saying the same thing. You're absolutely right. It is more powerful, because what's going to happen then is you're not going to have to worry about, oh, am I going to be hypersensitive if she's criticizing me, or if I'm feeling like, you know, I've been, you know, accused of something. You're not going to be reactive. You're going to be responsive to things. You're going to be so outwardly focused. You're going to be thinking about her need before she even thinks about her need. The idea of lying to her about anything will make you ill in a way that you wouldn't want to do this. It becomes a completely different paradigm, which again, it's hard to understand, you know, when you're in the state that most of the men are in now, right now, and that's the idea of recovery. But see, what we're talking about and what this book is about is not just, okay, how do I no longer continue to not do fill in the blank? It is about the transformation of the heart. It is about becoming the new guy, the guy who she looks at and says, who the hell are you? I don't know who you are, but wow, I like you a lot. And therefore beginning a whole new chapter in the relationship.
So there is a reward, and that's what we have to keep in mind. Somebody once said Christianity is a religion of reward, and I've thought about that a long time. A lot of the parables of Jesus talk about reward. And so when we do the individual work of discipleship in the addiction recovery, when we get to the blind spots, and I'm going to plug my computer ends here so I do not, come on here. Oh, come on. Oh, there we go. Sorry about that. When we do that work, there is a reward. The reward is worth working for. And I think that's the lesson for today.
Can I add one other thing, Jay, for that reward? You know what the other reward is? Confidence. We become so confident in who we are that we can have a healthy, vibrant relationship, that we don't have to yield to childlike things in our life anymore, because we now are really acting like godly men.
Amen. The book, Why Men Struggle to Love, Overcoming Relational Blind Spots by Eddie Capparucci. Eddie, we appreciate your insight so much. I'm going to give you the floor if you want to say anything finally on this subject, and then pray for us if you would.
Yes. What I want to say is this. The problem that for us who are in those early stages of addiction, or perhaps have just struggled and haven't been able to break out of it, it lies here in being emotionally undeveloped. And the big issue is we're oblivious to this. We're just completely oblivious to the fact that we suffer so much deficiency when it comes to our emotional development. But now what I hope this book is doing is we are now starting to talk about this. Because I think it is something that needs to be talked about. And that's why I say being sober is not enough. There needs to be more, so that you can turn the corner and wind up down a road, walking back on that road of sanctification, where you are in line to being more and more Christ-like every single day. So I hope this is like that wake-up call to men. That's what I'm hoping the book is. That is the feedback I've gotten thus far. Incredible feedback, but not just from men, a lot from women who have been reading the book and saying, oh my gosh, I want my guy to be like this. So this is the roadmap to get you there, to get you back on the path of sanctification, or if you've never been on that pathway, to put you there. So with that, let me pray for all of us. Gracious Heavenly Father, you understand the struggles, you understand the torment, you understand the despair that so many who listen or are listening today are going through. And we'll go back to a point that we talked about earlier. I want you to start to provide hope. I want you to open up their eyes, open up their ears, let them learn, let them understand that major part of what's going on here is that they don't have the skill set needed to be able to succeed. But that with you and with them turning to resources that are available, to people who are available, to other men who are available, for them doing that they can finally break free of this cancer that have been eating away at themselves and their relationship. So I ask that you put hope in their hearts. I ask that you start to put them back, have them go back on that pathway of sanctification, where they learn to become Christ-like. And of course, for them to start the process of recognizing every action and every action that they take, it should be for your glory and your glory alone. Amen.
Amen. So this ends our first in a series of spring Zoom seminars. If you would like to, and watching us on YouTube, if you want to subscribe to our YouTube channel, just hit the subscribe button. We at Living Without Lust are here to help you. If you want resources, you can go to the website, livingwithoutlust.com, or email me at j@livingwithoutlust.com. Eddie, thanks so much for your time. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Jay. Always love being here.